Oh, no. There it is. It was wrapped up. It's still wrapped up. Oh, thanks, Lisa. Thank you. I've done this before. I'm a professional. Not really. I've never done this before. No. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Cedar Creek. How we feeling? Yeah, way to go. Thanks. Awesome. All right. Welcome, everybody. Got a couple announcements for you. First one is if you are a visitor here at Cedar Creek. Oh, I'm going to borrow this. Yay. If you're a visitor here at Cedar Creek, we have these really cool green subscription cards you can fill out. You can put your name info on there. Fun fact, if you are new here, we ask you to sign up, subscribe, and on your 10th visit, you get a free baptism. So, yeah, come on down. For those of you who are regulars here, we do have the green box in the back over by Greg over there on the table. If you have a tithe or offering, you can put that in that green box. You can also put the green cards in there if you are new. Again, the tithes and offerings, we typically just ask if you're a regular here. If you're new or first or second time visiting, there's no obligation to put anything in. Hey, if you got kids in here and they're getting wiggly, we got wiggle room for you. Out the doors here, take a left, and then you have to sneak by Ryan and Spence. They got pretty good eyes. But there's a room down there. 3 doors down, there's a TV broadcasting the service. So if you've got wiggly kids, you want to get them out of the service so they can wiggle about, you can put them over there. Wives, if your husband's really annoying today, you can also send them that way too. So not a problem. Let's see here. Oh, hey, is anybody here between the ages or between the grades of 6th and 12th grade? No, you're not. You are? Okay, good for you. Hey, there's a Cedar Creek Youth Group is going to be October 12th from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Or I guess until the fun runs out. I don't know when it'll really end. Anybody in here in 13th grade? Any college kids? No? No? All right. Well, you're not invited anyway. All right. Cool. Coming up next, I'm going to ask Sarah. Come on up, Sarah Spence. There she is. She's got a fun announcement tonight. We're going to be talking about a mission trip with Feed My Lambs. Everyone, round of applause.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Spencer, and my family, yes, all 9 of us, are heading to Mexico on October 30th, and we'll be coming back on November 14th. So 2 weeks mission trip down into Mexico. We're blessed to be able to fly into Harlingen, Texas, and then the missionary will come and pick us up and bring us down into Mexico from there. We are very excited. We've been there several times doing missions trip. The last time we went was last year in February time, and we had a 2.5-week mission trip planned that lasts for 5 weeks. So when I say plans change, I am not joking. It's true. We did a lot of missions work out there at that time. I have no idea what's okay. You can go to the next slide. This year, we also have a lot of projects. So last year, we did a bunch of concrete work, and we did made a whole bunch of beds for people that come and stay at this ministry center. The ministry center, you can see this is one cabin on the right. You can see a cabin. That line is brand new bathrooms this year. A huge blessing for the place. You think of 100-some kids and 7 bathrooms with 7 showers is not enough. So they have brand new ones, 3 new ones accessible from the outside, a brand new one handicap accessible shower and bathroom in one of them as well. So it's just a huge blessing that they were able to get this year. This year we will be working on the banister up on the top. You can see a very small piece. There's a banister up there. It goes all the way across. That is number 1 cabin. So it goes all the way across that and then down a really long staircase that goes down to where you can stand and see up there. We'll be working on new banister, a roof for it, for that number 1 cabin, and then the side of that cabin that you can't see, there's some siding that needs to be redone. There's also a large amount of other projects that need to be done, general maintenance that my husband is very gifted at doing, and other things that come up. Churches, we visit churches, we do whatever is asked. Last year, my husband ended up building a bookcase for the school across the street. Those kind of just small ministry things that we can do, we're open to doing whatever God leads us to do. Abby is going to tell us a little bit about what she thought was fun last year and what she did.
What I like to do is I like to help them and I like to play with the kids.
Last year we did teen camp and kids camp as well, which was an option for this year. I'm not sure what they decided, if we'll do it or not. But the kids got to join in with the other kids and play with them and talk with them-ish. We're not very good at Spanish, so we're still working on that one. This year, new slide, we are, only those three projects are about $4,000 for materials. We are halfway there with other support, and so we're asking if any of you feel led to help support us in getting to that last $2,000 for that project. We would greatly appreciate it. If you look at your bulletin, it tells you information on how to get it to where it needs to go. So if you feel led to do that, please join us. Next slide. Please pray for our trip. Last year on our way home, we all got the flu. It was not pleasant. So we're going to pray and actively pray that we are all healthy the whole time. No injuries. As some of you know my family, they are accident prone. So please pray for no injuries would be great. That we can share the gospel in whatever way it is, whether it's through our work, through our actions, through our words, whatever God puts in front of us. And pray that we can be flexible. Like I said, things change. Churches say, hey, I really want you guys to come. Let's just pray that we are very eager and open to changing our plans, because when you get into a project and you just want to finish the project, doesn't always happen. So just pray that we're open to changing wherever God leads us, and that we can just be a help to the people that are out there. You can do the last slide, I think. Our goal is just to be willing to do God's work. We want to finish as many projects as we can for them, to be a blessing to Gary and Minnie and Sophia. Sophia is Gary and Minnie's daughter. And that we can just be a ministry to whoever comes to the ministry center. That ministry center is there for people to come use for free. So if you think about retreats that you go on, you have to pay a big fee. It's free for people who want to come and use it. And that is the goal, to be able to have a place where people can come together, praise the Lord, worship God. They can do baptisms there, do men's retreats, pastor retreats, kids camps, teen camps, anything. Sometimes churches just come and use it for a weekend for whatever purposes. Sometimes they have special ceremonies for Christmas and Easter and all those kind of things. So it's a widely used. It's always busy. So just pray that we will be a blessing to those people. And thank you for your prayers and your support.
Thank you, Sarah. Hooray! Yes, mission trips are awesome, fantastic. They're good times. If you can't go on mission trips, the best way you can support is prayer, number one. You can also donate financially, anything you can do to help make the people going easier. I went on a mission trip to Honduras in 2013. A lot of fun. My wife and I, we were not married yet. But Sarah's right. Plans change a lot. In fact, I remember Rob was with us on the mission trip, and he got really frustrated because we were supposed to be making beds and doing all these things, and the pastor we were teamed up with was like, no, we'll do this later. I want to take you fishing, Rob. So Rob was really mad because he had to go fishing with the pastor in Honduras. So anyway, hey, speaking of praying for things, we're almost there, folks. We're rounding third. There's a men's prayer group. Raise your hand if you have a Y chromosome. Good job. You're invited. Congrats to Travis Walter for organizing that. Years ago, we did have a men's praying ministry here. It was called Men Who Pray. Looks like Travis is going to take up the mantle and try to revitalize that. We're going to meet every fourth Sunday from 8:30 to 9:30 for about an hour, 1 hour of power prayer. First one's going to be October 26th, so mark your calendars. Men, I'm going to let you on a secret. You really want to get your wife excited about you? Go pray. Real men pray. Okay, last but not least, we're going to stack chairs today. Don't forget, we have Awana. Otherwise, Justin has to do it, and he can't lift more than 5 pounds right now. So, all right, without further ado, here comes Rob with a live 50-plus minute announcement.
No. It is true that we went down there was that Honduras? And they wanted us to make beds. And so I was all about, we're going to make beds. We might have made one. It was like, why aren't we making beds? And it wasn't our fault. We wanted to, but we had to go fishing, and there's nothing we can do about it. And we did go fishing. It was fun. All right. We are into, I totally forgot to do something this morning. I apologize. My better half, Justin, is not here. He helps me with administrative things. I forgot to print off the little sheet. I'm sorry. I apologize. Let's just go home. There's no reason to be here. I apologize for that. You're going to have to just follow along as best you can. You have to pay attention. Yes, you have to pay attention. We are in Genesis. We're circling back to pick up Genesis again. And we were in that. The last time we were in Genesis was several weeks back. Justin just finished up a series on biblical manhood, and that took 3 weeks. But before that, we were in Genesis. And again, if you're new here, we've been slowly working through Genesis. We'll grab a chapter or two, then we'll take a break, do something else, and then come back to Genesis. So we're coming back to Genesis now, and we're in Genesis chapter 47. Last time we kind of split the chapter up, and we skipped a little section right in the middle of Genesis 47. So we're going to pick that up today, and it's Genesis 47 verses 13 to 26. So if you have a Bible, you can open up to that, Genesis 47, 13 to 26. I'm going to read that passage here in just a second. Let me just set it up very, very briefly. What has happened here is Joseph, who is a descendant of Abraham. This is the beginning of the nation of Israel, of the Jewish race. Joseph had been in Egypt. He'd been sold there into slavery. He'd risen to power in the land because God had given Joseph the ability to see into the future. And what Joseph saw, what God showed Joseph in the future, was there's going to be a famine for 7 years, and then there's going to be, there's going to be plenty, great abundance for 7 years, and then there's going to be 7 years of famine. God had showed that to Joseph, and Joseph had told that to Pharaoh, the leader of the country. Joseph had proposed a plan to deal with that. During the 7 years of plenty, let's store up grain, and then when the famine comes, we'll have grain, we'll have food. So that's what had happened. Now here, the section that we're reading today, we're seeing that plan being executed. The 7 years of plenty has happened, and now we're in the 7 years of famine. So that's what this passage is about. So I'm going to read here, and I'm reading in the NIV, Genesis 47, verses 13 through 26. There was no food, however, in the whole region because the famine was severe. Both Egypt and Canaan wasted away because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan in payment for the grain they were buying, and he brought it to Pharaoh's palace. When the money of the people of Egypt and Canaan was gone, all Egypt came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? Our money is used up." "Then bring your livestock," said Joseph, "and I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock, since your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, their sheep and goats, their cattle and donkeys. And he brought them through that year with food in exchange for all their livestock. When that year was over, they came to him the following year and said, "We cannot hide from our Lord the fact that since our money is gone and our livestock belongs to you, there is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. Why should we perish before your eyes, we in our land as well? Buy us in our land in exchange for food, and we with our land will be in bondage to Pharaoh. Give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become desolate." So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. However, he did not buy the land of the priests because they received a regular allotment from Pharaoh and had food enough from the allotment Pharaoh gave them. That is why they did not sell their land. Joseph said to the people, "Now that I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh, here is seed for you so you can plant the ground. But when the crop comes in, give a fifth of it to Pharaoh. The other 4/5 you may keep as seed for the fields and as food for yourselves and your households and your children." "You have saved our lives," they said. "May we find favor in the eyes of our Lord. We will be in bondage to Pharaoh." So Joseph established it as a law concerning the land of Egypt, still in force today, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. It was only the land of the priests that did not become Pharaoh's. All right, so we see there Joseph now is executing his plan. Let's walk through that a little bit and think about it. It's interesting here to me that the grain is being sold back to the people of Egypt. In other words, when the 7 years of plenty were happening, Joseph was collecting grain from the people. It was theirs. And if you look back on that in Genesis 41, it talks about that part of Joseph's plan. Genesis 41, verse 34 says, "Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of those good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so the country may not be ruined by famine." Think about what that was. These people, the people of Egypt, were raising their crops. They had a lot of them. The government, Pharaoh, was taking 1/5 of it, storing it up because we're going to need it later. But now that the time came to need it, the people had to buy it back. In other words, it's like if someone said, "Hey, if you took your money to the bank and said, I want to put my money here in the bank in case I need it later," and the bank, when you came to get it, and the bank said, "Well, okay, but you have to buy your own money back." That's a terrible bad example. I made it up in the moment. But you get what I'm saying. This grain was the people's, stored up for the country, it said. Well, now that they need it, you got to pay for it. Is that good or bad, right or wrong? I've read that story many times, and I've wondered about that. Is that good or bad? Is that right or wrong? I don't know, but that's what happened. That's what happened. The grain that had been stored up, their grain that had been stored up for the country, now when they needed it, they had to buy it back. At the time that it was happening, almost certainly the people didn't care because there was so much abundance. Back in 41 again, chapter 41, when we see this happening, verse 47, it says, "During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. There was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure." In other words, there was so much grain. There was so much wealth. Joseph couldn't even count a fifth of it. He was taking a fifth of the grain, and he said, "There's so much I can't even count it. It's like the sand of the seashore." So the people at the time likely didn't care. They had so much grain they didn't know what to do with it. "You want a fifth? Take it. Get it out of here. I don't want it." But now it's coming back on them. Now it's coming back on them. The grain was for the country. At the time that it was taken, the people probably didn't care, probably didn't miss it, maybe didn't know what was coming in the future, but it didn't matter to them because they had so much abundance. But now the chickens are coming home to roost. Now you have to pay the piper. Now there isn't any grain. They've used up all of that abundance that they had. We don't know what they did with it, if they planted it, if they wasted it, if they ate it. We don't know, but their food is gone, and the only place that there's food now is Joseph has it, Pharaoh has it, the country, the government, if you will, has stored up this grain. So the people come and they buy grain and they pay their money for it. But the cost keeps going up because the next year the famine's not over and they ate all the grain that they used before, so now they got to pay a little bit more this year. It's kind of like supply and demand. There's a big demand for grain, and Joseph has all the supply. He can charge whatever he wants for it. You don't have any money? Give me your livestock. All your cattle, your horses, your donkeys, your sheep, your goats. Now, this is what people lived on. This was food for them. This is how they made income. In essence, Joseph is saying, okay, I've got your money. Now I want your ability to eat and produce wealth. Give me all of your livestock. Well, they did, because they didn't have much of a choice. They ate all that up. The next year, the price went up again. I still need food. I still don't have any. Well, the price went up. Now I want your land. All of it. Bring your land. And all of your land that you used to own, now it belongs to Pharaoh. And the price went up even more. Not only do I want your land, but you are going to become Pharaoh's servants. You are going to be in bondage now. You're going to be in servitude to Pharaoh. In other words, the price just kept escalating until the people had nothing left to give but themselves. You have all my money, you have all my livestock, you have all my land. I still don't have food. You are the only one that has food, Joseph, Pharaoh. All I have left to give you is my liberty, my freedom, myself. All right, I will submit myself. I'll become in bondage to Pharaoh so that I don't die. The price just kept going up. And the reason is, I think, that desperation creates dependence. I think that's true of all of us. When we're desperate, we're willing to become dependent. We like independence. We'd like to care for ourselves, take care of ourselves. Many times that's what we do. That's what God wants us to do. But when we're desperate, it creates this sense of dependence. In verse 19, I'm back in chapter 47 now, but in verse 19, we see that. The people say, why should we perish before your eyes? We and our land as well. Buy us and our land in exchange for food. Give us seed so that we may live and not die. The people were desperate, and they were willing to become dependent because of it. And so what happened here in this story and in the land of Egypt at this time is that I'm going to use the word government because it's one we understand. And by government, I mean kind of the overarching civil authority of the land, which in this case was Pharaoh and Joseph. The government became primary. The government became the sole source of all that was needed. The people needed to eat. The people needed protection. The people needed something to do. The government became the sole source of all of that. The government owned all of the income. The government owned all of the property. The government owned everything. And so the things that people needed to live, they had to get it from Pharaoh, from Joseph, from that overarching civil authority. The government became primary, and the people lost their liberty. Whatever liberty they might have had, we don't know what things were like beforehand. It seems as though the people of Egypt had more self-governance, had more freedoms, had more independence. They owned land, they owned cattle and livestock, they made money, they were free to sell their crops and whatever and do what they would, buy more land, very similar to what we have here. But now at the end of this time, none of that is true. They cannot buy land, they cannot become anything because they have to go to the government, and the government tells them, here's what you're going to do. You're going to work this plot of ground that Pharaoh owns. Here's seed to do it. When that comes in, here's how you're going to spend your income. The grain, a fifth of it goes to Pharaoh. The rest of it you can eat, but then you got to plant that next year. They lost their liberty. They became subject to Pharaoh, and the government became primary. Verse 21, at the end of this, it just lays that out. Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. Joseph said to the people, now that I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh, here is seed for you so you can plant the ground. But when the crop comes in, a fifth of it goes to Pharaoh. And it says, this passage ends with So Joseph established it as a law concerning the land of Egypt, still in force today, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. So that's what happened there in Egypt. And when we read things like that, when we read through Genesis, the point again is not just to get a history lesson, not just to get a civics lesson. It can be that, but the Bible can be and is intended to be so much more for us. If you remember, as we've talked through Genesis, God wrote this book to help us to understand many things, to help us to understand Him. But one of the things He wrote it for was to help us to understand ourselves and the world around us. Because God created the world, God created us, and Genesis is a book where He tells us some very foundational things. So this book, in many ways, is designed to help you and I understand ourselves right now, in this time, and understand the world around us, the world that we live in right now at this time. And so with that in mind, when we look at this story, I want to ask the question, what can we learn from this? This is not just a history lesson of Egypt. This is not just a civics lesson on forms of government. God wants you and I to understand something about ourselves, about the world we live in, and about how we interact. So what is it that we can learn from this? And as I chewed on that and thought about it, I thought of this. This is really a passage about government. So I'm going to spend the rest of our time here answering this question: what is the role of government? We see a government here. We see the people interacting with the government. We see God intervening in this because God had brought Joseph here. God had done all these things. God's hand is in this. This is not happening apart from Him. But we see that happening here, where people are interacting with a civil government, and it's a back and forth, and God's involved. What can we learn from that? How can we understand our world today? And I think that it's pertinent. You know, sometimes government functions and you hardly notice it, right? It just kind of, it's going on and you don't think about it much. That doesn't seem to be the world we live in today. There is a lot of discussion about what government should and shouldn't do. The immigration question is big. Our political scene is very polarized. There are very, very, very different ideas about what should the government do, what should the government not do. Things are happening in our world that haven't happened for a generation or so. And if you're a fan of history, it can be exciting. You know, I wasn't alive and really engaged back in the 60s when the civil rights movement was happening. But at that point, the federal government intervened into the lives of everyday people in a very powerful way. And it was a chaotic time. It was a momentous time. I wasn't around then. I'm around now, and I'm seeing things happening with our government. I think, I haven't seen that before. The National Guard is being called out in different cities. Well, that certainly happened in the past, but not in my lifetime. And people wonder about it. And these are impactful times that you and I live in relation to our government, how our government functions, how we interact with it. So what can we learn from this? How can God help us to live well now? These are our times. God has put us here. It's not a mistake or an accident that you and I live here now with this government. So the question we have is, well, Lord, what would you have me do? What would you have us do? How do we understand ourselves? How do we understand the times we live in? How do we interact with the government that you have given us? This country's 250th anniversary is next year, 2026, and we're going to hear about it a lot. We're going to hear about the founding fathers a lot in the next years. In the next year. And again, if you're a history buff, this is going to be great. If you don't like history, you're just going to be so glad on July 5th, 2026. You can stop hearing about it. But it's pertinent for us now. So that's what we're going to do here for the next few minutes, is ask the question, what is the role of government? And again, we're asking it from God's perspective. God is not divorced from this. God was not absent from this situation here in Genesis. He's not absent from our situation right now. So we're looking to God and saying, Lord, what is the role of government for us now? Okay? So that's what we're doing. And first, let's look at what is the purpose of government. This is sounding like a civics lesson, isn't it? Stick with me here. Stick with me, because God speaks to us, and it's the world we live in now. This is pertinent to you and I. So what is the purpose of government? Some people think that there should be no government at all, perhaps. What does God say about it? Here's what I see in the Scripture. The purpose of government, it's a God-ordained institution to do a couple of things. One of the things is to give order. God institutes government in order to give us order. Crowds create chaos. Lots of people together need some sense of order, some structural organization to keep things running. One or two people by themselves can just figure it out by themselves. The more people you get, the less possible that is. And so you need some kind of central organization to create order. We see it all through the Scriptures in Numbers chapters 1 through 4. This is when the nation of Israel now has grown exceedingly large. They're moving across the desert from Egypt into the Promised Land, but there are over 1 million people out there. That's a big crew. And so God institutes a government. He institutes a structure. And if you read through those chapters, he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Everybody is part of a tribe. There's 12 tribes. Every tribe is divided up into clans. And so you know your clan, you know your tribe, and so you know where you live, you know when you move, you know all this stuff. There has to be order, and that's what Numbers 1 through 4 is. He says the priests are going to do this. There's all this work that has to get done to pick up the tabernacle, to pick up the camp, to move across the desert. So you guys right here, your job is to do this. You guys right here, your job is to do that, so that there is a sense of order and you don't have chaos. Can you imagine saying to 1 million people, okay, folks, we're going that way? No, you wouldn't get there. There has to be some sense of order. God instituted it there. He did it again in 1 Chronicles 23 through 27. This is now many years later when the nation of Israel is in the Promised Land. They have taken over the land. They're now a country, not just a group of people, but a country. And they have a king named David, and David sets up a government. And if you read through those chapters, it says, okay, this department is in charge of the livestock. This department that is run by this guy is in charge of the army. There are all of the things that a country needed to do in order to have order, and God set it up. Even in the church, in Acts 6, if you know that story, in Acts chapter 6, 1 through 7, the church now is a group of people, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there was a need. There was a structure to feed people who needed food, but it wasn't working right. There were too many people. People were falling through the cracks, so the leaders of the church set up a structure. Okay, you 7 guys now are in charge of this thing. You need to gather the food, make sure the people are getting it when they need it. God is a God of order. People, we need something to give us order because crowds create chaos. Think about in our own country. What does that look like? Well, we live in a very vast country. Here's just one example of how we see that in our country. You know, early on in this country, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, that's, how many miles is that? I don't know. Anyone know? 3,000 miles. That's a long way. Well, they wanted to have a way to get from one to the other. They wanted to have some way to travel from here to there, not just so people could go there, but so that you could bring goods and services back and forth across the country. So they built a transcontinental railroad. This railroad that went from the eastern seaboard to the western seaboard. But it was too big a project for any one person to do. Nobody had the money, No one person had the money or the ability to do this. It was just too big a project. And so the federal government stepped in, and they taxed people, said we're going to use the money from everybody all across the country. We're going to collect all that money, and then we're going to give this job to people who know what they're doing, and we're going to create this thing. It was done by the government to help create order. Now, it's the same with the interstate system. I was just down in Alabama and Tennessee, and when you want to get from one place to the next really fast, in your car, the interstate system is a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. We drove from southern Alabama to middle Tennessee, and it might be the only place in the world that doesn't have an interstate anywhere close to it. And I was driving through these tiny little towns and around. It was kind of fun, but it took absolutely forever. The point is that we have an interstate system so that what? So that we can travel, so that there's order in the country, so that the trucks can move from one place to the next. No single state could do that. No single person could do that. No single corporation could do that. There had to be a government, a central structure that says we're going to gather the money from everywhere, we're going to plan this out, and we're going to construct it. Governments, one of the things that God, I think, purposed for them is they help create order. There's a second purpose of government, I think, and that's this, that it administers justice. That passage in Exodus there is again a story of the nation of Israel when they were coming out of Egypt, and you can read it. It's a story where Moses was kind of the one judge in the whole country for these millions of people. So it said that on the right days, Moses would go sit in his seat, and everybody would come and present their cases to him. Hey, this guy owes me money for my cow, or hey, this guy, did something. Whatever it was, Moses was the only court for 1 million people spread out over the desert. Moses' father-in-law looked at this and said, "That's not good. That's not good, Moses. This is not working." So Moses set up a judiciary system. He got all these guys and he taught them the law, and he said, okay, you're in charge of this bunch, you're in charge of that bunch, you're in charge of that bunch. Justice required, to have justice come, to have all of the disputes settled in an orderly way, they had to create a system. There had to be some structure that overarched all of the people. In Proverbs 29, Proverbs talks a lot about this, about kings, but Proverbs 29:4, it says, by justice a king gives a country stability. The one who is greedy for bribes tears it down. By justice a king gives a country stability. Countries need stability. Again, we don't want chaos, but in order to have stability, you have to have justice. And so we see that. That's one of the purposes of government. It clarifies and enforces the rules. The government created an interstate system, but they did something else. Somebody decided we're all going to drive on the right side of the road. And that's really good. It's good that there's a rule, and it's good that we all know it. And it's good that somebody enforces it. That's one of the things government does for justice. It clarifies the rules, and it enforces them, and that's very, very, very good. We would not like it if people could drive on any side of the road they wanted. It's great to have those trucks going up and down the interstate, but I like it when I know where they're going to be. So justice means clarifying and enforcing the rules, but there's even more to it than that. Government administers justice by restraining evil. We're going to get to this in a minute, but one of the purposes of government is to restrain evil in the world. And we can think about that in terms of, well, we don't want people to murder. That's true. That's very true. That's one of the ways that looks like. We don't want people to steal. And so there have to be rules and there has to be someone to enforce them. That's true. That's very, very true. But it even goes beyond that. Sometimes evil doesn't look and seem like evil, and yet we need the government to see it and to stop it. Let me give you an example. Andrew Carnegie is a man, many of you have heard the name. Andrew Carnegie, right around he was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was, at the time, the wealthiest man in the world. Incredibly generous. He built libraries all over the country. Anyone ever been in a Carnegie library? He would go to these little towns all throughout the country and just pay for a library. There was one in Rice Lake. I grew up going to a Carnegie library in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. But Andrew Carnegie was an incredibly, how do I say this? He built unimaginable wealth, and he lived like a king. He had mansions in Scotland, all across the country. He was the wealthiest man in the world, and he lived like it. He denied himself nothing. All of his generosity came from excess. He never denied himself a thing ever. And he grew exceedingly wealthy in the steel industry. That's how he made all his money. This was when the Industrial Revolution was at its height. Everybody needed steel. Andrew Carnegie got in on the ground floor. He was the one who was producing steel. He became incredibly wealthy, but he did it by having thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of men and women and children work 10, 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. And he thought, he recognized it and thought to himself, no, this is good. Some people should be wealthy and some should be poor. That's what he believed. If you read about Andrew Carnegie, he believed that. The people looked at that and said, we don't like that. But there was nothing they could do about it until the government stepped in. And the government said, no, we're going to pass laws where you can't have your workers work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. That's not going to be possible anymore. And that was good. It was a restraint of whether it was the greed or the arrogance of the magnates of the day. Does that make sense? The government needed to step in to restrain that arrogance, to restrain that greed. The people couldn't do it themselves. They tried to go on strike. Well, Andrew Carnegie hired strike breakers. And strike breakers back then didn't come in and work. They came and beat the workers until they went back to work. It was not a good situation. The government had to step in. So, what is the purpose of government? It is a God-ordained institution to bring order out of chaos and to clarify and enforce justice, to enforce the rules and to restrain evil. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Government is a good thing. But let's take it another step now. That's the purpose of government in God's world. How does it work? What is the practice of government? In other words, how does that play out? Well, this is where things start to get tricky. And I will say this: government is a good thing run by sinful people for sinful people. And so it starts to break down. Not because the institution itself is bad, but because of those who are engaged in it, on both ends of it. Let me read a passage to you here in 1 Samuel chapter 8. This is again, the nation of Israel. We're looking back into their history and learning here. 1 Samuel 8, I'm going to start with verse 7. And I'll read through verse 18. It says this: And the Lord told him, this is the Lord speaking to Samuel, listen to all the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. God's talking about how is the nation going to be governed. It's not you they have rejected me as their king. As they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me, serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do. Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of him. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your men servants and maid servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks. Yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, and the Lord will not answer you in that day." That's not a ringing endorsement, is it? Of a government. God is saying, you people are rebellious. You've been rebelling against me forever. And so you're going to get a government and a king, and he's not going to be any better. And the point is this. You see, God creates institutions that I think were designed for a perfect world without sin. We don't live in that world. By our own choice, we have become sinful. And so we as sinful people are trying to interact with a government that is administered and run by other sinful people. So it starts to unwind. It starts to go bad. And this good thing that God created starts to work poorly and starts to harm instead of to help. That's just the reality of the world that we live in. I don't know that it is inevitable that every government will go bad, but every government is sure prone to it. At best, the best government in the world is imperfect. If you read through the administration of David, King David in the Old Testament, he was a godly man. He loved the Lord. He really wanted to be a good king. He sacrificed himself for his people, and yet he made terrible mistakes. He did ridiculously selfish, arrogant things. The people rebelled against him. The best you can hope for of government is that it's going to be imperfect. At worst, it's tyrannical. It's ugly. It's a meat grinder that eats up the people that it oversees. At worst, at best, it's imperfect. So, where does that leave us? Where in the world does that leave us? And I'm going to end with this. That makes it sound like we're almost done, but we're not. It's full honesty here. We got a little bit to go yet. The purpose of government is good, to bring order, to bring justice. The practice of government is, well, it's run by sinful people, for sinful people, meaning on both ends of government there are mistakes, and not just mistakes, sin. So the last question I'm going to ask is, given that, for us, what is the place of government? What is the place of government in our lives? In other words, how do we interact with it? Right now, how do we as Christians, how do you and I, as followers of Jesus, as men and women who have accepted Christ, become those new creations? How do we interact with government? What's our place, or what is government's place in our life? And I have a few thoughts on that. Things that I think God tells us that we can do today, in the world we live in today. Here's the first one, and that's to obey. This is a very famous passage. If you've read the Bible much, you've heard this probably. Romans 13, verses 1 through 7. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear? of the one in authority, then do what is right, and he will commend you. For he is God's servant to do you good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also because of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give everyone what you owe him. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Government is a necessary thing instituted by God, and we need to respond to it. And one of the ways that we respond to it is we submit to it. You drive on the right side of the road. You pay your taxes so that the interstate highway can be maintained. We obey the laws as they're given to us. It feels like we should talk about that more, doesn't it? But I don't know there's much more to say. It's pretty straightforward. Now, we're going to get to the other side of that here in just a minute. But I'm starting with this, because I think, as I read that passage, here's what I think. I think it tells me to look for reasons to obey. Look for reasons to obey the government. Sometimes we look for reasons not to. I certainly do that. My wife is smiling because she knows her husband. I was raised by a dad who just knew that game laws were not meant for him. We could shoot deer whenever we wanted to, and we did. If it's the middle of June and we don't have any venison, I'll go kill a deer. Okay. Sometimes we look for, and Dad's rationale was, well, there's so many deer. It doesn't matter. DNR's stupid. We need a deer. They're in the backyard. They're eating the tomatoes. Kill the dang thing. Just go do it. We look for reasons sometimes to disobey. Now, my dad, most of us tend to sugarcoat it a little more than that. You know, we want to make it seem more righteous or godly or something. But oftentimes it's not. And so I tried hard to come up with more on this, but honestly, guys, I think it's look for reasons to obey and don't complain about it. Pay your taxes and don't complain. I don't relish paying taxes, but I sure like having a road to drive on. I sure like that. I don't relish paying my electric bill, but I sure like power. I sure like electricity. I'm a big fan. Look for reasons to obey and don't complain about it. I think that's where we start. We have to start there. And the truth is, most of the time, that's where we stay. You begin with, I'm looking for reasons to obey, and I'm not going to complain about it. You begin there. Don't be in a hurry to leave that place. As a Christian, I'm looking for reasons to obey. This institution is good. It's imperfect, that's for sure. But the institution is good. It's necessary. It's God ordained. I'm looking for reasons to obey. And I'm not going to complain about it. It's really as simple as that. We could spend a lot more time there, but I want you to, everything I'm going to say next comes after this, comes under this, okay? Everything I'm going to say from here on in comes after this and under this. I'm starting with, I'm looking for a reason to obey, and I'm not going to complain about it. That's the first place of government in our life. Here's the second one. Don't idolize government. Don't idolize it. Here's what I mean by idolizing. An idol is something that we look to do something that God says only I can do. That's what an idol is. We look to something to worship it. We look to something for security. We look to something for identity. We look to something for provision to care for us. God says, no, these are things only I can do. Anything we take and we put in a position that God says, that's my position, that's what an idol is. It is very simple for you and I to idolize government. What does that look like? Well, we think that the government is going to provide for me. God says that's not true. Matthew 6:33 says, hey, I know you need food and clothing and shelter. I know you need all these things. But you seek first me, my kingdom, my righteousness, and I will provide all of these things for you. God makes you a promise. He says, you seek me and I will watch out for you. The government may make that promise, but they can't keep it because economic hard times happen. Wars happen. Things happen. Imperfect people run the government. God is none of that. He's perfect. Nothing affects him. When God makes you a promise, he can and will keep it. Who do you look to for food? The Egyptians said, well, we're looking to the government. God says, no, don't. You look to me. You look to me. Don't look to the government for security. Psalm 56:4. When I am afraid, I will trust in you, in God whose word I praise. In God I trust. I will not be afraid. What can mortal man do to me? God sees you. His hand is on you. He says that you are my son, my daughter, you are my servant, and I will watch over you. I will care for you. My son is in the military. The military is a wonderful, beautiful thing that is necessary for any country. I'm a fan. But the military tells my son, you know what, I can give you an identity. I can give you a mission in life. You can define yourself by being in the army. And I say, no, you can't, son. No, you can't. No, God gives you an identity and no one else. You carry his name. Your mission is not what the army says. It's to serve your God, your king. See, we are strangers and aliens. We live in this world now, but we serve an ultimate king that he has to be the one that we look to. I will not look to a man to do what God says only I can do. It comes down to this. Compare Psalm 91. I love this passage. Psalm 91, verse 14 through 16. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him with long life. I will satisfy him, and I will show him my salvation. This is what we have to put. This is what we're banking our life on, Christian. My honor, my mission, my provision, my entire life. God says, I will give it to you. Do you look to him for it? Or do you think, well, I don't see him, but government's right here. Compare that to Isaiah 2:22. God says, stop trusting in man who has but a breath in his nostrils. Of what account is he? Folks, we serve a different king. We receive our identity, our life from a different king. Do not. Government is an institution created by God, but it is not a substitute for God. It doesn't replace him. It doesn't replace him. Don't idolize the government or anything. I mean, that can be a lot of things we can do. We can idolize our job. We can idolize all kinds of things, our spouse, our family, all that. But government is one of them that we can look to and say, well, you know what? Only the government can protect me in this evil world. Well, that is not true. God burned up the entire city of Sodom, just burned it right to the ground. He saved Lot. God is able to save those who look to him, no matter what else is happening around you. Government cannot save you. The government cannot define you. The government cannot provide for you. God says, only I will do those things. Don't idolize the government. You obey it. You don't idolize it. And finally, you engage in it. You engage in the government. And that looks like different things. In Jeremiah, Israel, the nation of Israel, was in Babylon. They had been taken captive and they were living in a foreign country. And Jeremiah tells them this in verse 7. He says, "Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, if it prospers, you too will prosper." And just a few verses later is that very famous passage that we read. God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope." In other words, God says, I will provide for you, but part of my plan for you is for you to work with the government that you have now. We need to engage with it. Seek its peace and prosperity. What does that look like? What does it look like for you and I to engage in the government? Well, I think it means two things. You use your voice and you use your vote. We can influence. You and I have been given an incredible gift that many people in the world don't have, and throughout history, very few people had. We absolutely influence our government. With our voice, we can speak. If you remember just a few years back when the Eau Claire School Board, there was a memo that came out, you folks remember this, where there was an instruction to the teachers, we don't want you, if kids come to you with questions about sexual identity, you cannot tell their parents. We don't want you. And the thought was, well, we want to create a safe place for the kids. I'm sure it was well-meaning, but there was an uproar. People spoke out. They used their voices. You and I have a voice. We need to use it, and we need to use our vote. I hope and pray that all of us vote. It's such an amazing thing that we choose our leaders. That is not we live in a time where we think that's normal. It's been normal for a very short amount of time in the history of the world in a very few places. Let's not get complacent. We can engage in our government by speaking. We can help shape public opinion, and we can vote. We can shape the government itself. You have to engage. As Christians, we cannot run from it, I don't think. You engage by influencing. And I'm going to just drop a bombshell and then walk away because I got 1 minute. There are times, and I'll talk to Mark and Justin, maybe we'll pick this up next week, I'm not sure. There are times when you have to resist and rebel. As a Christian, there are times when you have to resist the government, and there are times when you have to rebel against the government. In Daniel, this is a very famous passage again. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God who is able to save us from it, he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." There was a law that was passed by the king. You have to bow down and worship these things. These three men stood up and said, "No, I will not. I will not." They did it courageously. They didn't do it skulking in the shadows somewhere. They stood up and they said, "I will not obey that law." They resisted. There are times when as Christians we have to do that. There are times as Christians when we have to rebel. I had a great history lesson planned for you. We were going to look at the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the American Civil War. 3 completely different times when people rebelled against the government. 1 was very good, 2 were very bad. But there's a time as Christians when we need to rebel. Rebel and resist are different things. Rebel and resist are different things. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not rebel. They didn't try to kill the king and set up their own government. They stood up and said, "I will not do that for conscience sake." Their conscience and their courage led them to stand up and say, "I will not obey that law." Sometimes we resist. sometimes we rebel. That's a bombshell. I realize that. But we're out of time, so I hope you figure it all out. And I really do need to go. Maybe we'll pick it up next week. We'll talk about it. Let me pray. Lord, I just thank you that you have instituted government. Lord, this is a thing that you have created for our good. It is a good thing. And yet we're sinful people. We live in a broken world. It's imperfect. Teach us, God, to live well now in the world you've given us. Help us, Lord, to look for reasons to obey without complaining. Help us, Lord, not to idolize government, to look to you for the things that only you can do. And God, give us wisdom to know when we resist, when we rebel. We need your help in all of these things. We ask you to help us. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for